International piracy today is largely focused in three main areas. The widely known Somali-based piracy, operating largely in the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Aden, West African piracy, operating in the Gulf of Guinea, and Southeast Asian piracy, largely concentrated in and around the Malacca Strait. At IHS Maritime, we've been keeping track of not only the piracy incidents, but also the potential impacts they have on international commerce and trade. Today, I'll be examining the main trade routes on the world's oceans, their trends going forward, and a potential impact of pirate attacks on these routes. In this slide, we have filtered down vessel traffic from our AIS Live software platform to display only tanker vessels. These include LNG, LPG, and crude carriers. The red spots highlight the main piracy risk areas. Currently, a huge volume of energy products head from the Middle East towards the Pacific, largely due to the power-hungry demands of East Asian economies. Some 830 million tons of tanker trade flowed eastwards from this region in 2012. A large number of these passed through the Suez Canal and entered the Somali high-risk area stretching east from the Gulf of Aden. The tanker traffic coming from the Persian Gulf, however, largely avoids this high-risk area as it hugs the Indian coastline and heads towards the Malacca Strait. Provided the vessels are not calling at the ports around the strait, these tankers should be able to enter the South China Sea relatively unaffected by Southeast Asian pirates. The tankers heading out from Nigeria are the most likely to be targeted. In Africa, where 170 million tons of tanker cargo was shipped towards Europe in 2012, the oil-rich countries in the Gulf of Guinea have seen some of the most serious cases of cargo theft in recent years. The tankers heading out from Nigeria are the most likely to be targeted. This slide shows the volume of seaborne tanker trade since 2010 and forecasts steady growth to 2020 along the trade routes shown previously. Note that the West Asia, including the Middle East, to East Asia route makes up the bulk of this trade and is forecast to reach some 1 billion tons by 2020. Aside from this, all other trade routes are set to grow steadily, including exports from Africa to East Asia. The energy needs of the Indian subcontinent are also set to rise from 2014 onwards, and the number of ships heading there from the Middle East will rise rapidly. Moving on from tanker traffic, we now examine the bulk carrier trade, which includes coal, iron ore, and other raw materials. Again, East Asia dominates the trade, as shown by the high density of vessels around the Chinese and Japanese coastlines. Not surprisingly, one of the largest routes is from Australia to East Asia, with 831 million tons being moved in 2012. This is largely due to China's appetite for iron ore. Note that the majority of vessels head north from Western Australia via the Sulu Sea, or from Eastern Australia via the Solomon and Bismarck Seas. This largely bypasses the pirate area in the Malacca Strait. However, a sizable quantity of bulk cargo does head from Africa towards East Asia, and this 141 million tons must go through the strait. Historically, bulk carriers have been frequently hijacked by Somali pirates, but this is largely due to the fact that the smaller bulkers with low freeboards and low speeds are highly vulnerable to pirate skiffs. There is no indication of cargo being targeted in these hijacking incidents. The forecast for bulker traffic shows steady growth through to 2020, with Africa reaching around 180 million tons and Australia reaching 900 million tons by that point. The development of new supersized bulkers, such as Valemaxes, might dominate that ore trade in the future. These vessels are considerably harder to hijack than smaller bulk carriers, but there will always be regional traffic that consists of the latter. This slide shows the export-driven container shipping sector. Not surprisingly, the majority of trade flows from East Asia towards the rest of the world via container ships. The largest quantity consists of about 9 million 20-foot equivalents going to the European Union. The majority of these vessels pass through the Suez Canal as well as the Somali high-risk area. However, the height and speed of container vessels means that they are not as vulnerable to attack. Note the high concentration of container vessels passing between Malacca and India. This trade route between the European Union and East Asia is third largest in volume only after intra-Asia trade and the China-US trade. some 3 million TEU does head to Africa, but these are largely going via the Cape and thus largely bypassing the Somali high-risk area. Container traffic is also set to increase in the next decade, with IHS forecasting exports to the EU from East Asia topping 13 million TEU by 2020, despite a recent dip in 2011 and 2012. Trade with Africa and the Middle East is also set to rise, but at a much slower pace. The new generation of 3E container vessels, which have been designed to provide economies of scale, should see ever larger ships. However, these vessels are so large that it will be difficult for any pirate groups to board them. This shot shows the importance of Malacca as a gateway to East Asia, the largest consumer in terms of energy, raw materials, and exporter of manufactured goods. With the rise of these sectors predicted in the coming decades, the density of the figures on this map will only increase. It is also easy to see why this area has been so prone to acts of piracy, with the ports and anchorages being a target-rich environment. However, due to the highly capable Coast Guard and naval forces in the region, as well as information sharing and denying the pirates a benign operational environment, the incidents have largely been restricted to robbery at anchor. The latest data from RECAP, the Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery Against Ships in Asia, largely shows a decline in overall numbers for the first 3 quarters of 2013 compared to the same period in the past 4 years. Other notable elements include the fact that only 6 incidents out of 90 reported were actually acts of piracy, with the overwhelming number being robbery conducted at anchor. While there does not appear to be a resurgence, the Malacca choke point, funneling most of Asia's trade, will make it a tantalizing piracy target for years to come.